After 5 long years, the new installment to the Mass Effect series has finally been released. Despite the ending of the third game, the Mass Effect trilogy is still praised today for its quality of gameplay, and most importantly, its story. While having nothing to do with the original trilogy, Mass Effect Andromeda still has some big shoes to fill when compared to its predecessors. Andromeda distanced itself as far as possible from the previous games in the series by taking place in a different galaxy. The player follows the story of the Andromeda Initiative from the eyes of one of the Ryder twins as they search for new planets for species from the Milky Way to colonize. The story hits the ground running shortly after the game starts due to the first attempt at human colonization being a huge bust. As it turns out, planets tend to change after 600 years of space travel. With the human's first choice for a new home being a no-go, it's up to the player to start looking elsewhere. Naturally, different species have already colonized various planets in this new galaxy, and it presents the theme that the player is the true alien here. It's a theme that the game points to early on, but quickly discards as the plot progresses. The fact that the theme is dropped so quickly is somewhat disappointing because I believed it would provide a really interesting point of view. Any good story needs to be presented well if it wishes to immerse whoever interacts with it. Sadly, Mass Effect Andromeda could use a lot of help in this department. While the voice acting is okay for the most part, that's only half the battle when it comes to showing off a compelling narrative. Body language is what really makes scenes and dialogue come together, but sadly Andromeda falls flat on its face when it comes to this. The voice actors did a great job of making the two playable characters come to life, and their performance along with the writing really makes me care about their issues when I didn't expect to get attached. However, I only mentioned the two playable characters having solid voice acting for a reason. When it comes to the rest of the cast, things can get a bit rocky. I will fully admit I avoided talking to a specific character as much as possible because the voice acting dialogue was just so poor. It pains me to say that I did something like that, but that's how strongly I felt about the character's performance. Moving away from the voice acting, I have to talk about the really ridiculous facial animations. There were a few intense scenes along with several conversations that became near laughable due to how poor the body language was. Throughout my 36 hours of playtime, I've seen more than my fair share of poor animation, like the main character looking like he's about to take a nap during a scene where he's supposed to be fighting for his life. It's hard to take anything seriously when your characters don't have the looks to match the tone. Animations aside, I enjoyed the dialogue I saw. In specific, I really liked the conversations that crew members shared while idle. There was many times where I would drop whatever I was doing just so I could listen in on what my party members were talking about. It gave a more personal side of the characters, opposed to having them all be faceless soldiers who know how to aim. There are definitely some things you could salvage from the visual presentation in Andromeda, but there's still a lot to be desired. I'm pretty happy to move on the gameplay because this is where the game really shines. Well, sort of. I really did enjoy the gameplay, but I can't praise it without talking about some of its obvious blunders. These obvious blunders come in the form of the revamped space exploration and resource gathering systems, with space exploration taking most of the heat. I'm very critical of both of these systems because they were done pretty well in previous titles. Navigating the galaxy used to be a simple and somewhat fun task. You'd choose a planetary system on the galaxy map, and then you'd use your keyboard to pilot your ship around said system. While piloting, you could run scans of the planets in your immediate area and see if they had anything worth gathering. Unfortunately, in Mass Effect Andromeda, they've taken this mechanic, crumpled it up into a little ball, and then slam dunked it into the nearest trash can. The previously well-done space exploration has been replaced with a new system that no longer allows you to pilot your ship. Instead, you simply click on the planets you want to go to. When you arrive on said planet, you can then scan for resources. That doesn't sound so bad, right? Well, it wouldn't be if it wasn't for the 5 to 10 second unskippable cutscenes that occur every single time you want to go somewhere in space. The first time was bearable, but by the 10th and 11th time, I was prepared to rip my eyes out. To further tack onto this huge mistake is planetary travel is something you do on rare occasions. In fact, it's a huge method of transportation when just getting through the main and side quests. If players try to use traveling to random planets as their main method of gathering resources, then they're going to be in for a really bad time. This is because of the fact most planets don't have anything to gather. In fact, in my experience, only 1 out of 5 planets have something worth getting. Luckily, resource gathering can also take place while exploring planets you land on, so the new system isn't all bad. The reason why it's important to have a good method of gathering raw materials is because Andromeda introduces a new research and development system. It is essentially a crafting system where the player spends research points they earn while exploring planets. However, when you use research points, you're only making a blueprint, which means you have to go back onto the planet to find more resources so you can actually make the weapon you just researched. It's a system that I found myself spending time with in the beginning of the game, but I quickly abandoned it because I happened upon plenty of good weaponry while clearing out enemies. Moving away from what Mass Effect Andromeda does wrong, exploring planets that you can land on is easily one of the best things to happen to this series. Now, I specifically say planets you can land on because while you can fly to a bunch of different places, you can only take your ship down on a select few. This is a great decision because it means the players won't be exploring samey environments in different shades of blue. These planets all have some role in the story, and they're jam-packed with side quests and various things to do. Due to this, I always felt like I had something important to work toward, and in turn that made even the most mundane tasks like clearing out camps of enemies feel like they served a bigger purpose. Because of this feeling, I easily spent most of my playtime just seeing what planets had to offer while completing side quests. Of course, navigating through unknown territory that has already been claimed can lead to lots of combat. And thankfully, despite being slightly dumbed down, great combat is still a staple in this series. In previous games, players used to be able to command their squad mates to use their specific powers. That's a mechanic that's absent in Andromeda. However, to me, that's not a bad thing. I never bothered to command my squad in the earlier games, so I don't mind this change. A dedicated jump button has been added opposed to having to hug and then vault over small barriers, and a dash has also been added as well. These two additions are fantastic as they make the movement far more fluid and clean, but they could be a bit smoother. I always feel like I have a very slight input delay when I hit my spacebar, which definitely feels off, but other than that, I only have praise for how they handled movement in this game. To round this all out, I want to quickly touch on the multiplayer. If you came to Mass Effect for a deep multiplayer experience, you're better off looking for a different game. For any people familiar with Mass Effect 3's multiplayer, it's the exact same thing with a fresh coat of paint. You go for 7 rounds fighting waves of increasingly difficult enemies, with each wave having a different objective. If players like the look and feel of the core gameplay of Andromeda, then they'll definitely enjoy the multiplayer because it's just that part isolated. It's a good time killer, but other than that, there isn't much more to say. Since the second of its announcement, Mass Effect Andromeda had its work cut out for it. It was a new installment that had to live up to the previous trilogy while making up for said trilogy's mistakes. Those are some pretty high standards on top of the fact that it also had to be a fresh new experience to be able to be differentiated from its predecessors. I'd say that Andromeda has definitely blazed a new path forward, but in doing so it has tripped over itself with some of the things it's left behind. It has provided some solid combat, immersive open world mechanics, and a fresh story to follow. However, it has lots to improve when it comes to space exploration and most importantly, its visual presentation. Does the new installment live up to those that came before it? As a regular fan of the series, I'd like to think so, but for many of the diehards out there, it probably has a long way to go. For more reviews on video games and hardware alike, as well as first looks, editorials, and build guides, be sure to head over to KBMOD.com.